Hey, welders, ready to upgrade your gear and save some serious dough in the process? The Miller Build with Blue Savings and Rebate Program has you covered. Find amazing deals and cashback rebates on a wide range of Miller products, from welders to plasma cutters and everything in between, all backed by our 3-year warranty. Don't let this opportunity pass you by. Take advantage of the Miller Build with Blue program now. Visit us online or stop by your nearest Miller distributor today to start saving.
Welcome to another episode of the Strange Motion Way podcast. I'm your host, Tim Strange, along with
Carrie Strange.
And I'm just going to say, other than technical difficulties that we've had for some people, this is the hardest person we have worked to get. He's a very busy person.
We
finally got him. And we had a little technical to start, so hopefully this works. He calls himself the Kid on the Carpet. I just love that name. Have you ever heard him call himself that?
Yeah, I think so.
You might see him on TV doing play-by-play for NHRA and Hot Rod Drag Week. He helped start the Bang Shift website. He puts on an amazing, not just drag racing, but the Dorkomotive podcast. I listened to a 2.5-hour podcast on the Ferris wheel one day on a drive.
And we've talked about that on many episodes.
We have. It's got mentioned a few times. Also, he does the Hot Rod Magazine podcast with John McGann. I say he is the modern day Dave McClellan or Steve Evans. Welcome tonight's guest, Brian Lohnes.
Man, that was an awesome introduction. Thank you. That was killer and too kind.
Yeah. So, and I didn't use a walking encyclopedia for drag racing. So
that's an occupational hazard right there. Yeah, that's an occupational hazard.
And as we said before we started, our first guest after, 57 episodes that actually has a microphone on the other end. So maybe the sound will be pretty good on this.
And headphones. Like, we were actually having that conversation the other day about the headphones. Like Tim says, well, what does it benefit for wearing headphones? So why do you wear headphones?
I think I like wearing the headphones when I use a microphone because it kind of feeds right back in here, so I can understand if I'm like being too loud or if I sound like garbage. I get a little indication first. But no, you could do earbuds too. I guess I always just have these laying around because I use it when I do like voiceover stuff, and I got a little room bottom of my house I do that stuff in. So these are just always kind of handy, I guess.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't like it. It flattens my hair.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I'm not. I mean, our microphone is like, yours is right in front. Ours is 6 feet away from us because I'm a loud talker and it just blows out. We're still learning a lot on the sound. So,
yeah.
So Brian kind of makes his gig by telling other people's stories and doing drag racing. So we're going to get your story.
Okay.
So go back. How did little Brian, like you say, you call yourself the Kid on the Carpet, sitting there on Sunday watching drag racing. I think that's, as a drag racing fan, we were all the Kid on the Carpet. So I think that's like the coolest name ever.
Yeah, I think for me, that's it's where it started in some form or shape or fashion. But really, I didn't grow up actually thinking I'd be doing this particular job. When I was growing up, I was like, obviously love drag racing and love cars and everything to do with it. And, my dad had a 64 Pontiac GTO, which he still has, that, we cruised on Saturday nights and did all that stuff with and went to the drag strip every once in a while. But I always just wanted to write for car magazines. Like, that's what I thought my path was going to be was, I dreamed about writing for Hot Rod someday. I went to college with David Kennedy, who I now work with at the NHRA, but he was like my hero because he was a year older than me. But when he graduated, he got a job with Peterson's 4-Wheel and Off-Road magazine. And I helped him load his stuff into his pickup truck at UMass. And he drove off to California to go write for a car magazine. It's like, damn, this guy pulled it off. And it's like, if he can do it, I think I might be able to do this too. And then it was really during that same time frame where I was in a motorsports club at UMass, and we actually had a road racing car. We had a 1978 Volkswagen Rabbit we competed in the SCCA with. We were in a class called Improved Touring C. And the New England region put out an announcement that they were looking for somebody to announce these races. And my buddy was like, oh, you should go try that. And in the back of my mind, I had always thought about trying it at the drag strip, but the road course stuff, I was so unfamiliar with, but I also didn't know anybody there, so I wouldn't be embarrassed if I was terrible at it. And the good news was I was terrible at it. And but it gave me enough confidence to contact Lebanon Valley Dragway in New York, and that I still remember it plain as day. My first ever Saturday going into the tower to announce a test and tune up there. And that was legitimately the very first step in this whole, process that's become my career.
Okay. So you glossed over little Brian.
Sure.
Let's go back to, your dad had the GTO and he still has it.
Yeah.
So was there like a local, I mean, obviously my dad and my uncle was a hot rodder. So that's kind of why I got the bug.
Yeah.
And was there another local guy, like you remember, he worked at the gas station and he drove a Deuce Roadster or something like that?
Oh, yeah, there was like
local drag race guy or?
So we would go every Saturday night. There's a place in Natick, Massachusetts. Used to be, it's gone now. It's called Nick's, and it was a drive-in restaurant. And it was actually profiled in the Cruising USA series that Hot Rod did way back in the day, where they went to like the hottest cruise spots in every state. And we would go in there, and it was just like, you would see, like, I don't know if you have this guy named Rick Fenimore had this at the time. It was the craziest Pro Street car in the entire New England region. And it was a very classic 80s, 90s, fairgrounds cruiser style car that he would basically trailer to a couple of blocks away and come rumbling in with this big giant motor hanging out of it and everything. And my dad's friends were all into cars. My dad's friend Kenny had a really cool 67 Camaro that, I remember the first time I saw the T-handle nuts that held on valve covers. I'm like, man, these are awesome. It was like, and it was all that 80s kind of kitschy stuff. But, as far as like local racers, I can't pinpoint any local racers. I just know that my dad was a racer in the 70s and up until, 80 when I was born. So that his photos of stuff were always around the house. And then, we would watch American Sports Cavalcade, and they would cover at the time, the majority of the NHRA season. And I just remember as a kid, I remember loving drag racing. And then every Christmas I would ask for that year's, And They Walked Away tape. And then Diamond P made $1 trillion off of my family because I asked for everything. And They Walked Away. I have the Monster Trucks tapes. I mean, all that stuff. And, to me,
tapes?
I have them all. I have every single one of them.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. I have a few still in the tub. Yeah.
And, those were the things that, I wore them out like you probably did. You wear them out and, I can still quote. I can literally still quote some of McClellan's and Evans' calls from those crashes on those tapes. I don't know. It just burned themselves into my brain.
So in high school or going to school, what kind of a student were you? Were you a good student, or you were just like, man, I got to get out of here. I want to go play with cars?
I think I was a pretty decent. I was like a gentleman C guy. I was very much a social guy. I was friends with like pretty much everybody. I was in the band. I was also, my best friend was the guy I worked at the gas station with, and we worked on cars together.
Okay, we're going to play a game.
Sure.
What do you think, Brian? I have no idea. What are you going to guess that Brian did as a band person?
Oh, Lord. I'm going to say trumpet.
I'm going to say, I want to say flagman, but no. I'm going to say tuba.
I was you guys split the wickets. I was a trombone player. I was a trombone player from fourth grade all the way through the end of high school. And I don't know. I guess I've always been the kind of guy to be kind of friendly across the board. And I ended up being the class president when I was a senior in the whole thing. And it was like, and it was less about being, I don't know. I literally was friends with everybody. And
I think it was a graduate class that you were president of.
It was like 99 kids. It's very small high school.
We're both from some graduating class, super small school. So.
Okay. Yeah. So, and that in a way makes it even more difficult. Like when it's that small, you guys know this, like you live in a small town, you have a small class, like everybody's trying to be in everybody else's business and stuff like that. So I always took pride in the fact that, I was buddies with everybody. And my best friend in high school was this kid named Brian Antonellis, who I worked with at the Shell station. And that was, I could tell you stories all night about that, but it was the last of the old school full service gas stations, and not just changing oil. These guys would do everything from swapping motors and stuff and do really heavy mechanical work. And it was awesome. Two older Portuguese guys owned it, the Fernandes brothers, and one of them learned to be a mechanic in prison. And he would work on cars all day with a Winston wedged between his teeth. One of his teeth was missing. He'd wedge his Winston in it. But he was also, I mean, between he and my dad, they were great guys to learn to work on stuff with. So, yeah, I mean, that was my deal. I was not that great in math. I was horrible in foreign languages, and I was able to smile my way through those two classes and graduate with like a high C.
So the gas station, was that your first real job?
That wasn't I worked my first real job. I mean, so my dad and grandfather had a pallet and box business for like 45 years. So I started working there on the weekends when I was a kid. And then I would continue to work there on the weekends. And then I worked at Domino's Pizza, I guess was my first real job outside of working with my dad and grandfather. And I did that, part-time, but then I worked at a sub shop, and then I worked at the Shell stations where I wanted to work since I was a kid. It's a cool gas station on the corner, guys there growing up, all the kids that worked there in high school, most of them always had some kind of cool car, and you drive by at night and their stuff would be inside and they'd be working on it, which I always thought was great. And so I ended up working there with Antonellis for several years, and we ended up being the guys with our broken ass cars on the lifts at night, pushing them in and out of the bays and make sure the stuff was cleaned up. But in terms of my first real job with cars, that was it.
So what was your first daily driver car?
My first daily driver was a 1984 Monte Carlo. It was my great aunt. My great aunt had it. She had died, and I think I paid like $500 or $600 from the estate. But this thing was pretty clean. Was not an SS, but it had a 305 and a Quadrajet, and it was a two-tone brown car. So it was like that darker brown on the top and a lighter shade on the bottom. And I paid a guy that paints trucks. I paid the guy, and we're talking now like in 1996 or 97. I think I paid him $500, and he squirted it 1968 Ford Acapulco blue. And I put a set of Krager mags on it. And so I had a blue car with a brown interior. Bottom line.
Was the air cleaner lid flipped upside down so it would go whoa when you stepped on it?
Oh yeah, the air cleaner upside down until I invested at the time the $25 for the Summit chrome chrome air cleaner deal. And I at the time I got a Super Chips prom chip to put in it and did all the little I think I put an intake manifold on it. And it was a tugboat, but it was mine and I loved it, and it made the right noises and did the right things.
Very cool. So that was your daily, you grew up, you're Upper East Coast, right?
Yeah, still live in New England. Yeah, Massachusetts. Yep. Okay.
So do you have that accent? Like if I wear tan, like dress pants, what are they?
They're khakis.
And if I stick the thing in my ignition to start it, what are those?
Those are khakis too. Yeah.
That's the only question I had planned. So I'm going to get that.
Yeah. The funny thing is, it's like and I learned this a long time ago, probably 20 years ago when I was working with IHRA. I was doing a race in San Antonio, Texas, and it was about the time that John Kerry was running for president against George W. Bush. And the guy that I was in the stands, I was going to interview a fan, or we were killing time. Somebody oiled down the racetrack, and the guy this guy Brian Olson, who was announcing the race, when he threw it to me, he said the guy from Boston. And the amount of people in this crowd in Texas that immediately like started screaming stuff at me, and I thought I was going to get attacked. I'm like, lesson one: nobody needs to know you have an accent when you're speaking in public. And so I've always it's not that I'm afraid of it, but I just feel like when I have a couple of beers and I'm hanging out with my friends, it turns right into what you'd expect it to turn into as far as the accent goes. But I also feel like when you're talking to a big audience, not everybody wants that. You kind of want it down the middle.
Yeah, because I worked at the Power Block, and the only local there close enough was Tommy Boschers on the Muscle Car Show. Tommy's still there, I think, for the long time. And he's got a pretty strong Southern accent still. Yeah. And he went to a voice coach to get rid of it because they said,
"Oh, get out of here,
guy." And they said, "You got too much of a Southern accent," because there's transplants from all over the country working there, and he went to a voice coach to help get rid of that.
Wow.
Yeah. Again, when he gets drunk, it comes out really thick. Yeah. He was like, "What did he just say?"
Like, mouth.
Yeah, he's not like the Appalachian mush mouth people.
Yeah.
But if you're a female and have a Southern accent, it's okay.
Certain ones, yeah.
Oh yeah.
So you get out of high school. What's your next plan of attack?
So one final high school story I'll tell you is that going into like halfway through senior year, at this point, my buddy Brian and I and our friends have been going up to the drag strip for a couple years on testing 2 nights and just hanging out. And I had this 82 C10 with a 4-speed, and it actually was a cool truck that I was going up there and making, ripping, 16-second runs in this thing, thinking I was a hero. But we actually got together and we're like, hey, let's pool our money together and put together something we can bracket race and run on test in 2 nights. So me and 3 of my friends, Brian Antonellis, guy Brian Franey, another guy named Dana Chandler, we all threw in like $400 a piece, and we bought a 83 Firebird with a blown up V6 in it. I went and picked up a Caprice with a 350 in it out of a trailer park in Hyde Park, Massachusetts for like $300. We got an IHRA rear end out of the junkyard for $150. And my dad bought a camshaft, a Torker camshaft, and Edelbrock intake manifold for Christmas. And we slapped all this stuff together, gutted the whole car, and towed it up to Epping. And you can still do this, but you can leave your car in the pits through the week. So we towed it up there in June, and it stayed up there all summer. And guys would go up and run it on test in 2 nights. My dad and I would go up there and bracket race it on the weekends. And we legitimately had like $1,500 or $1,600 tied up in this thing. And it was the most fun thing of all time. I mean, it ran, I think the best run it ever made was like a 1390 or whatever. Like the fact that it ran 13s was a big deal to us at the time. But that project to me was like one of the coolest things we ever did. And the double down on it is like my buddy Brian Franey, it was, he wasn't even that much into cars. He just liked the idea of having something that was loud and went fast. And he's like a major league, like insurance executive now. And I always remind him, it's like, dude, you drove that death trap. Like you're in the insurance business right now only because you drove that car. But that winter, that experience was great. And the funniest part of that is the transmission in that car was a turbo 350 that my buddy Dave, at the time, Dave Keenan, put into a 3rd-gen Camaro. So you could do that. You had to put a longer tail housing on it to fit in the same spot as a 700 R4. He had gone over to visit his grandparents in England, and his little brother had taken the car out and totaled it. So we got this transmission from him for like $150. And when we took the car apart at the end of the summer, I got the transmission. And like 15 years later, ended up putting it in a project car Caprice I put together for bank shift. It had lived in my parents' basement for 15 years, pulled it out, changed the fluid, slapped it in the thing, and we're driving it around. So yeah, that was a fun project.
Yeah, I remember I had a Chevelle in high school. That was because I had winter beaters. That was one of my questions. You being an upstate, you go to the junkyard and buy an $800 car out of the front row that ran, because then the Chevelle went away because I was, a Northern Illinois guy. But my Chevelle was a 283 4-speed car, just stopped. Nice. It ran and never missed a tick. I just abused that thing, doing burnouts, and every time I took it to the drag strip, it would not run. Cutting out every single time. And like it ran like at high school drags. I remember it was like embarrassing. It ran like a 16.3, and like it felt like it was running on 4 cylinders. Me and my dad was, playing with everything, and we tried plugs. And it's like, I don't know. You get it home the next day, drove it home, and didn't miss a bit. I don't know, but I always remember.
Want to be raced.
They did not want to be raced. But I remember the high school drags for like the 3 years that I did it. There was this guy, like his family was bracket racers. And that's when pretty much only Cordova, Illinois was our local drag strip. And, I go World Series, all that stuff from a little kid. And we date and go in the World Series and stuff. And the rest of the guys, they'd go to World Series and high school drags. And they didn't follow drag racing. Maybe a couple guys from your school did. But they got so mad that the slowest car every year would win high school drags. He had like his winter beater it was like a 70-something Polera 4-door. But like
so just a barge.
He had a bracket car, and his dad and his family, I don't remember where he was from, like Rock Island or something like that, somebody around the local up there. But he'd just get in there, he'd put it in drive, and he'd just floor it and just let it shift. you know, they were bracket racers. They understood. He dialed in, and like, as I remember, he was never like more than 2/10 off of his dial in, just making everybody.
Yeah.
He was probably running a 19-second, you know, run down the quarter, but he
doesn't have
won
enough
3 years
power to
in a
spin
row.
the tires or anything. So yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
But back then, our goal with all my buddies that had cars that would take every once in a while, we wanted to run 12.9 because none of us had, you know, money. Because then you're getting kicked out because you don't have, you know, the cage and all that stuff in it. And T. Parkinson with his Camaro got kicked out for running into 12s with a big block Camaro. And
now I don't like people like you that want to like push that rule.
Yeah, Carrie runs events. She hates the rule pushers. Yeah.
Time changes. Time changes all of us, and you're right. It's we're all on the opposite side of that whole thing now. Yeah.
Yeah, some events she goes to, like she gets like heart attacks. Like she's like, I gotta leave. This isn't right. So, how long did you guys race that car for?
We raced it for one summer. The summer after we graduated high school. The spring we're in school, then the summer, and then we all went off to do various different things. You know, in the fall, I went to college. Antonellis went to diesel school. Guys went their different directions. Still in contact with most of them, but it was just a really fun. It was just a really fun project. And you know, like I said, they raced it. Those guys would go up on Wednesdays and Fridays and run it at Test and 2 nights, and my dad and I would bracket race it on Sundays at New England Dragway. And you know, so you know, I drove bracket race cars for 4 or 5 years when I was younger, like with my dad, who still races actively now. And I was just so good at it, I became an announcer. That's how good at bracket racing I was. Yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't like bracket racing because she likes heads up racing. First one there, the dial ins, the slower car leaves first. And as an announcer, and I've done some stuff, I get nerded out with bracket racing when you can sit in the tower and look at all the reactions and halfway through, you know, the 60-foot, all that. I mean, it's really impressive. A good bracket racer is very impressive to me.
Yeah, it's a skill set. I mean, it's a skill set just like anything else. And yeah, I would agree, Carrie, that in so many ways it's not the spectator side of the sport, right? It really isn't. And I, as much as I love announcing it and looking at it and have done gazillion hours doing it, I will readily admit it's not the thing that keeps people glued to their seats for sure. It's much more of a participant kind of driven side of drag racing.
Yeah, I really learned that in Vegas the weekend after the NHRA race during SEMA. Then they usually their Optima race, and then the big finals for the
divisional. Yeah, the big Division 7 race is going on.
And I'm like, I got to get there before they sell out tickets.
No.
And I get there, it's like I see the stands, and I'm like, is it canceled? You know, it's like one of those like. Yeah, you could have the run of the stands, but yeah. So what did you go to college for?
So I went to college. I got a journalism and English degree, double majored in journalism and English at the University of Massachusetts. I played to my strengths. I didn't have to do math. So I was all in on words.
Yeah, I did not know that about you. I know Joe Costello. He went to do that. He went all that for college too, right? And he wanted to be. He wanted to be the next Howard Stern. That's what he told me one time.
Yeah, radio guy. And you know, the two best things that happened to me at UMass were the motorsports club I was in was great. I learned, you know, I had never been around road racing, and when I went to the first meeting and they said they had this Volkswagen, I thought, oh my God, like I'm not going to spend time with a bunch of these guys. And it ended up being many of my best friends to this day in my life. And then I worked at the Campus Transit Authority. I was a student mechanic, so I ended up getting a commercial driver's license there, and I worked on trucks and buses. And that was for me, that was like a great paying job. I mean, I worked there like 15, 18 hours a week, and it was enough to, you know, like a real paycheck as opposed to some guys that were doing just work study, making $50 here and there. It was actually real money. So between that and getting the CDL, which I still have, it was valuable.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's what kids, I always say. Get a CDL, learn how to weld. You can always find a job with those two professions, I always say. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, knock on wood, I hope I get to do what I do for the rest of my life, but it's like, I do keep my CDL current because, you know, God forbid. I mean, literally, it's just like everybody, you got to have a plan B to some degree, even if you never want to use it. I always think of that. And it's like, should I renew this? It's like, why would I not renew this? It's just like you said, everybody's hiring truck drivers at all times, every day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So after school, were you doing any drag race announcing while you were at college?
So by the time I got out of school, by the time I got out of UMass, I was working at Lebanon Valley and New England Dragway kind of at the same time. So I would leave work on Friday and go to Lebanon Valley, which was like an hour west of UMass in eastern New York. And I would work there on Friday nights. And then I would leave there Friday night and drive to Epping. And I would work at Epping on Saturday and Sunday. And it's like the, most overtold story of all time, but they gave me the keys and I used to sleep in the timing tower there. So I would get there on Friday night. I would go into the track and I would sleep in the timing tower on Friday night and Saturday night, do my homework and stuff. And then I would drive back to UMass on Sunday afternoons. And I did that for basically the last 2 years I was in college. I would do that during the spring. And then when I went home, I would just work at Epping because trying to get to Lebanon from my house is like 4 hours. It's completely off the end of the, state of Massachusetts. I live on the eastern end. So that was really, that was where I would concentrate on my time at Epping. And then in 2000, I should say that, sorry, in 2000, I graduated in 2002. So in May, and then in 2001, I had started to do a couple of races a year with the IHRA. And so in 2002, I started announcing, I was traveling for them, announcing some national events, but I was a truck driver. That was when I got out of school, like the best paying option was getting a job driving a truck. So I was driving a truck. I was, freelancing for Bobby Bennett at Competition Plus and doing some other stuff. And then I was sneaking away on some vacation weekends for IHRA.
So you got any hot rods now, or there's no time for that? No,
so I got my old tractor. I got my old 1942 Ford that I've been tinkering with, and I have an 8BA flathead that's in pieces under my steps that I want to put together and swap into it. It's a fun old piece. I love the old equipment stuff. My son's cars are, I guess, the main wrenching material around here. So my youngest son just bought himself a 2003 Mercury Marauder, which is the current project du jour. It's his first car. So we've. Is that the
guy that harasses you when you say, send in questions in the Marauder? That's always your son harassing you.
It's always him. It's him popping into the questions. So he's got this Marauder, which jokingly and maybe honestly was the cheapest one in the country when he bought it. And so it's we've been going through that and just doing the stuff to get it right and ready for him to have his license in a few months. My oldest son, Tom, has a 98 E320 that was a project we pushed home from a neighbor's house, and it's lowered and he put a nice exhaust on it, and it's cool, balling on a budget. It's a neat car. Had never looked at any of those cars before, and we ended up having to go through that thing pretty much end to end, and it's been a good car.
Yeah, we had a local hot rod guy in Illinois that he had one. Rich Rule had one for a while right after they were new. But through all this time, when you're starting to do all the announcing, you're just announcing. You're hey, I'm going to be a drag racer. You realized, like you said, you were a bad bracket racer, so this is what I can do to be around the sport.
Yeah, and you know what is funny? I mean, as much as I love driving a car, like I love driving the race cars. It was fun. And that was my problem and I look at it now in retrospect, doing this for a living and having done it for a long time and knowing a lot of racers and understanding the people that are successful. Like I loved being at the racetrack. I just loved every second of being inside the gate at the racetrack. And my God, I got to hold on a steering wheel and hit the gas. That was even better. But the other guys are showing up to win. And there's a big difference. Like there's a big difference of people that walk in, and this goes all the way up to the professional ranks of drag racing. Like there are people that roll in on Sundays and they're just happy to be there, and they think it's cool to have a fire suit on, and they love everything about it. And I'm not knocking them because I'm that guy. But when I look around the staging lanes, it's like that guy's about to kill you. She's about to kill you. He's waiting to kill you. Like you're not walking out of here with a trophy today. And for me, I guess, yeah, this is the role that fit me the best. And I think that's a lot of when I started doing it, maybe that's what I really liked. It's like, oh, wait a second. Like I can do this. I think I can be pretty good at it. And they pay me to be here, which is kind of a crazy thing to think about too. And yeah, so I think that was it. I've never a lot of people have asked me that, like, oh, like, do you want to be a racer? And I'm like, I would love someday to just be able to go test and tune something and have some fun. But I think from my own personal preference, like when I listen to a lot of times you hear an announcer that like was a racer or wants to be a racer, and it's like they insert themselves in all these situations. I'm like, bro, no. To me, it's like Keith Jackson was one of the great sports announcers of all time. He's a legendary guy, and he always said one of his things was like, the field of play is no place for a fat-butted announcer. That was always his thing. It's like if you're the announcer, stay out of the game. Like, you're not supposed to be in the game. You know what I mean? That's always been my mentality too.
That's what Tim gets a lot with the autocross stuff. And it's like, oh, don't you want to have a car? Don't you want to race? He's like, you guys pay to come here. I get paid to be here.
Yeah, I get paid to hang out, talk about race cars, and nobody's going to pay me to drive. I know I'm not that good, but they'll pay me to talk about it. I would love to have a drag car, but then, I mean, I have hot rods, so that's bad enough. Yeah. But, I mean, it's a sickness. I mean, I had buddies, it's like they got their drag car or their dirt. We grew around big. We had a lot of friends dirt track or, circle track dirt cars. And it's like, it's another form of an addiction.
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
Like, well, the power will do, but, we can go down an hour away and run that race. And if we get the top 3, we'll have the power bill. But if we don't, our power might get shut off. I mean, that's how it does, but that's how people get to where they are. I listened to a bunch of other podcasts, and they were talking. There was one they were talking to a hot rod guy, and he lived in his shop for like 3 years and did the whore bath. Like, he didn't have a shower. And he finally made a hose so he could shower in his drain when there was nobody at night, when everybody was gone from the shop. And it's like you talk about sleeping in the tower. And we remember going to car shows. We had a truck and trailer, but we couldn't afford a hotel. We slept in our truck and trailer all weekend. And it's like, I'm sure there's still people out there with that dedication, but you just don't see that as much as people really, really want it. I'm sure there is in dirt tracks and drag racing of them, getting started, but now you see, it's like, it's hard and it's very expensive to get into any form of racing unless you have a relative that's in it or you got to sponsor money or whatever like that. But, growing up, that's, if you wanted it, man, you had to do it. And some of these younger kids I see, I don't know if they have that. I don't know anybody that's going to live in their shop for 2 years to make their shop, successful or try to get there.
I don't know anybody that would sleep in their Suburban.
Yeah, I can't now. But I'm going to say the guy, what's his name at Maple Grove? Who's the local guy there? Little skinny kid?
The announcer?
Yeah.
Billy.
Yeah. He slept in that tower a time before. I know he is. And he pretty much lives on microwave mac and cheese in that tower. So he was an awesome. I had to work there. I announced drag racing for a Hemmings event last year. First time going to Maple Grove. And I had a lot of fun with him. He's a lot of fun. He's a local historian. I think he's like, I just came with the track. He said I was just a local.
Yes. Yeah, I know. It's Billy's a great guy, got a heart of gold, and he can basically recite to you pretty much anything you ever needed to know about the history of that place. It's unbelievable.
Oh, he told me where that used to have a swimming pool over there, and it's been filled in. I was like, does nobody ever treat that kid nice? I bought him a milkshake, and it was like I gave him $100 bill. He's like, oh, I'll pay you. I was like, dude, I'll buy you a milkshake. And I went down and got him a milkshake. He was like, I didn't know milkshakes went with mac and cheese.
Any port in a storm, right? Any port in a storm, as they say. Yeah.
So how long did you do IHRA stuff? Growing up, I say around Cordova, that was a lot of, it was back and forth, but there was a lot of IHRA events there. And,
yeah, for me, I was with IHRA from basically that 02 timeframe up until like 2010 or 2011, to be honest. And the main reason was New England Dragway was an IHRA track. So that was really what I thought my path was going to be. And it was, and I had a great time. And, I got to that point in 2011 and I had gone from coming out of college as a truck driver. I was in basically the beverage industry, and I ended up working my way to kind of a fleet managerial style position there. And then I ended up moving to another company, again, kind of doing the fleet managerial stuff. So I was doing the truck fleet stuff, escaping on the weekends. We had started Bang Shift in 2008, and I was still trying to freelance to do other stuff on the side because ultimately I did want to get out of the regular jobs. Like I was pretty much running. I mean, I was running on fumes in a lot of ways. Like I was, trying to build this side of my life, but understanding that, well, I needed to make a living and pay a mortgage and do the normal stuff that you have to do. And so it was the 2011 season. Bang Shift had really started to grow in like 2009, and then 10. And by the time I got to the end,
who was the partners in Bang Shift?
So at the very beginning, it was me, Chad, and Freiberger. And David had left Hot Rod in 2008 to start this Car Junkie TV website with Freiberger, and they had venture capital money. And so I'm sorry, Freiberger had left the magazine to start that website with Chad. It was he and Chad Reynolds. And when the economy collapsed at the end of 2008, their venture capital money went away, and the company was basically dissolved. And they ended up walking away with some equipment, and the chat board, the message board that was part of this thing was like the one asset that they got. At the time, they had like 3,000 members or something like that. And I had been doing freelance writing for them at the time. And so they're like, hey, do you want to be a partner in our valueless company? I'm like, absolutely. I will be a partner in your worthless company, because what do I have to lose here? And so we ended up, Freiberger was involved until very early in about 2010, when the magazine company called him up and said, hey, you want to come back? And he had to. Like, there was no choice. The guy, he needed a job. This website was still in a situation where if it's going to sink or swim or live or die, no one really knows. And then all of a sudden, it was something, whatever, the algorithm clicked, and we ended up, the message board side starts to grow, our traffic starts to grow. We have to start signing advertisers. And November 11th of 2011, I got presented with an option to transfer, maintain my job and move to an office like 60 miles away, or B, take a severance. And I took the friggin' severance. I said, this is my shot. I was like, if I got one chance to do this, I'm gonna get a check to float me for a little bit, and then I can try to make the rest of this work. And that's been, that was it. That was when I left the normal, knock on wood, normal, job, and started doing Bang Shift full time. I was going down 3 or 4 days a week and jumping in as a reserve driver for my dad. If he had somebody that couldn't drive the truck that day, I'd run down and run his deliveries for him. And then I was picking up any races possible I could do. And even,
what did your dad, obviously a car guy, but
yeah.
What did he think of your decision to take the severance and go? Like, my dad's a car guy. We talk about this everyone.
Yeah.
But he still doesn't think. I've been building hot rods full time for 31 years. Yeah. I'm in a couple Hall of Fames, and my dad still. That's why he likes me doing the announcing stuff, because he thinks that's a real job.
Yeah, it was, he's a man of few words, and it was one of these things where I wasn't petrified to tell him. I wasn't afraid of being yelled at or anything, but I'm like, man, I have a feeling this guy's not going to be a big fan of this decision right now. And so I let him know. I said, hey, listen, we got this thing going, and I got some other stuff going. I'm like, I feel like I can make this work. And he's like, well, if you think it's a good idea, in the very, not in the most confidence of inspiring way, but yeah, they've been behind me, and the fact that he's a fan and loves the sport, and when he rolls into a divisional, occasionally people are like, oh, he can skip tech. We know his son. He's good. That earns me points every once in a while. Yeah.
So are you married at this time yet?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a whole process, man. What's that?
Does she have a job? We got some more money coming in?
Yeah. She was doing office work at the time, working at a kind of a chemical plant, doing whatever it was, invoicing or accounts payable, stuff like that. So, there was some level of stability there. But yeah, it was moving and shaking, and I ended up leaving IHRA almost in that same time frame, because the series at that point had really shrunk, and it was we had 2 guys match racing top fuel cars, and one of them was the world champion. And I just thought to myself, man, there were so many other opportunities at that time coming up.
Clay Milliken, right?
What's that?
Was that Clay Milliken?
Clay by that time for the IHRA, he was actually already racing NHRA at that time. He had already cut bait.
when he come to the World Series, the IHRA champion, and then they kind of got rid of fuel cars there for a while. Then didn't they?
We always had top fuel, but it became again more of a match race. They did not have nitro funny cars for a while, and then they had nostalgia nitro funny cars, which that was actually a pretty good program at the time. But the top fuel field had shrunk down to like 2 or 4 cars, and it was just kind of like this is looking pretty grim. And there was just so many more opportunities with independent events and match races and stuff. I knew that I could kind of pivot off one to the other. I mean, I remember being at some of those early FM3 events. I remember being at some of those events when those guys were just getting themselves started, and it's amazing to see what that's evolved into.
Yeah, have microphone will travel. I'm no Brian Lohnes, but it's crazy what I get caught. Like I get to go to, I'm going to Pittsburgh, and I get to introduce, along with car shows and motorcycles and tattoos, it's a 3-day rock festival. They're like,
nice.
Even like Buck Cherry get to do intro rock bands on the stage. Is like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, there's, it's funny. Yeah, you do find yourself in some odd places doing some odd things, but it's like you go there and you make the best of it, and you have fun, and it's a one for the memory banks, like going out and doing, dyno competitions and stuff like that. It's like, hey, if you need somebody, I'll do it. And that's really what it was at that time.
So we'll jump around a little bit. So we're on this. What's the hardest thing you've ever had to announce? I have one for me, and it was still car related, but what was the hardest thing? It doesn't have to be car related. Did you like have to call a square dance or something like that?
For me, that's an interesting question because it can go a couple different ways. I would say sports car racing is an art in and unto itself. And by the time I got done with doing that, knock on wood, and not to be self-inflating, but I feel like I was pretty good at it. And you're tracking 3 or 4 classes on the racetrack at the same time and trying to follow position. So that's very difficult. In terms, I think there's a part of me that enjoys the challenge of, doing the year-end NHRA awards ceremony. It's a big room full of a lot of big wheel people, and you walk out there on stage and you try to get them to laugh a little bit. And you try to get them to set the mood. And there's nothing more insanely satisfying than saying something that you hope makes people laugh and they laugh. I've loved that since I started doing this stuff at New England Dragway, looking out the window on a Wednesday night, cracking a joke and seeing a couple of people on the fence laugh. It's like, okay, I got you now. But yeah, I know. I think, yeah. But I guess the hardest thing I would go back to the road racing stuff, because I was so unfamiliar with it, and it was a humbling experience that I've not kind of forgotten about.
One of mine was, I was at a UMI event out in Pennsylvania for their Muscle on the Mountain. And then the one night, this a couple of years ago, they did a local series SCCS stock car on the pavement track.
Okay.
And it's like, I knew I was going to do this, but they didn't have like who was coming. I couldn't do any prep at all.
Oy,
like,
okay.
Yeah, no numbers, no backstories of people until a half hour before the race start. But luckily, the local guy that kind of followed that series to like that area's tracks, he was there and helped me quite a bit. But I'd be like, oh, car number 12, and then finally by the time we get to the feature event, I was okay, that's that person, that's oh yeah, their grandpa was this, so I was picking it up really good. But I still say the hardest thing that I've announced is a demolition derby.
I knew that's what you were going to say.
Wow. Yeah, not done one of those.
Yeah, because that where is
North
it?
Carolina?
Raleigh, North Carolina. Good guys. There's a venue that they can put, and then they can, they're there to make money, so they can put on a demo derby. And the first couple years, they hired a demo derby company to bring cars. Not only did they bring local cars, but they brought cars, and then like Goolsby's could $1,500. You could put your name on a car, and Jonathan Goolsby drove the car, and the Roaster Shop guys. So, but the guy, I forget his name, he worked at the machine shop at John Forrest Racing in Indiana. That was his hobby. Yeah, and they did that. It's been a few years since they had that crew down there, but yeah, it's like talking to him. He's like, "Yeah, I like machine the heads," So he did demo cars. Yeah, and but yeah, I remember like the locals come to that, and I'm like, car number 25. And it's like, the lady cussed me out because I didn't know that this was Bubba McJones, and they had their matching satin embroidered jackets for their team. And it's like, how do you not know who this is? He's a local legend. I was like, I thought I was going to get beat up. So,
well, there was a few things that you said that ended up being inappropriate, and we all about died laughing.
I thought I was getting fired from Good Guys that night. I meant to say, and luckily not everybody heard it, but it was pretty quiet at the time because once the demo cars start, nobody can really hear you. It's just so they were doing a couple teams. They were beating up and ganging up on another guy, and instead of saying beating him up, I said they were beating him off. I'm total on accident. And I was like, I'm getting fired. I look over, and the guys that signed the check for the Good Guys, they were crying. They were laughing so hard. They're like, we realized that was a slip. Just don't do that again. It's like,
well, and about the same time that you did that is when the two wives in the bleachers started getting into an argument.
Yeah, so people,
because the one was picking on the other one's husband, and so that kind of distracted.
So the crowd instantly started watching the ladies fight, and they forgot what I said. So yeah, demo derbies. I've done it 5 times, I think, out there. It's difficult to announce a demo derby. Yeah,
it seems like it would be.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been easy, like, because her dad and all their buddies did demo cars. I could have done that. And it's like, I know who everybody was, but you go into a town halfway across the country, don't know any of the demo derby crowd, and it's like, oh my goodness. So,
and those guys are serious.
Oh, they're serious too.
We moved down here, Pulaski, Tennessee. Oh yeah, their demo.
Yeah, Tommy Bochers, who we were talking about on the Muscle Car TV. He used to do demo cars for fun, and all the locals hated him, and he'd go to the big money ones too, because like, he had a World Industries block and World Industries cylinder head.
Oh, yeah. Stuff was indestructible. Like
grab somebody, push them out. Grab somebody and push them out. And everybody else is smoking coming in, and his is. Yeah. It was awesome.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, very, very serious there for a while. Yeah.
He didn't do it for fun either.
Oh, no, he did not do it for fun. He was serious. Yeah, serious. So. Okay, we got a little bit off thought here.
No, that's good. That's good stuff.
Yeah. We're a little random on this podcast. We don't have anything prepared other than, hey, let's get this guy to talk.
Absolutely.
So, okay, you're done with IHRA, and then were you just doing stuff at Epping, or when did the NHRA thing come about?
Yeah, so I pretty much was doing like kind of some local regional stuff and doing some. Really, at this point, Bang Shift was kind of at its height in that 2013 to, let's call it 2013 to 2017 timeframe when it was really hauling. And that
website huge back then. That was like one of the, when you guys started, it was like, and chat rooms. I was never a big thing on chat rooms, but you guys had one. ProTouring.com had one.
Yeah.
Lateral G, and then for the traditional hot rod guys was the Ham Jalopy Journal. Were the big ones. And but like I used to go all the time back then. That was like, oh, I'm gonna go and get my drag race news, or a cool story on whatever you would write about. I wasn't a message board guy, but I was an adamant click on Bang Shift every day to see what was going on.
Well, thank you for that. But yeah, the NHRA, New England Dragway switched sanction to NHRA in 2013, and so I guess they switched in 2012 technically, but in 2013 they had the very first kind of NHRA divisional race there, and then they would have the national event later that summer. And so, no one knew who I was. I was just some guy, and doing the divisional event. Actually, I should preface that in May of that year, I went down. Steve Gibbs had come up to the track to do the layout for the pits for what was going to be the New England Hot Rod Reunion. Like the Bowling Green race, they did one at New England for a couple of years, and he heard me announcing whatever it was on a random Saturday, and he's like, "Hey, you want to come down and do my race in Kentucky?" I'm like, "I'd love that. You're Steve Gibbs. You're a legend. I would love to do that." So I did that, and when I was at that race, Bob Fry was there, and Bob was going to do the Cackle Fest, and so Bob, I'd never met Bob. I knew, of course, who he was, and I waved to him through the glass, and he was in race control. And like 2 hours later, he walked into the back room, and he's like, "Who the hell are you?" And I told him who I was, and he's like, the guys in California should probably hear you. And I said, well, the good news is Epping's my home track in the national events in like 2 weeks. And so Bob Fry actually called the Glendora office and got me a tryout at that national event. And then I didn't hear anything. I thought it went well, but I didn't hear a word. And I was like, well, I guess that was it. And then at the SEMA show that year, I ran into Evan Jonat, who who works for NHRA. And he's like, hey, you're the guy from Epping. We need to talk about 2014. I'm like, oh, thank God. I'm like, I thought I blew it. I thought I had a slam dunk in my hands. But yeah, that was how I ended up getting in with NHRA. And then the 2014 season, I think I did 7 or 8 races, and I've pretty much been doing the tour since then.
So you start out doing like sportsman stuff.
Yep.
Thanks to you, you've got me in to do a handful of sportsman events.
Yes.
It's the big races there. It was before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody thinks, announcing drag racing is easy because you watch it on TV and it's like, oh yeah, I know Ron Capps and he does this, and then and all everybody else, and Leah, and now Tony Stewart. But to sit there and announce the sportsman, again, it's bracket racing, and it's like we've got an eye stock out there, and it's a little bit of it's not that easy to announce sportsman racing.
There is no announcing that I think is easy. So I would never be an announcer.
Yeah.
It's about being informed. Like, if you love cars and, like we've been talking about, I love cars. And it's like, that's why, I really enjoy stock and super stock, particularly because, you can tell all kinds of great stories about the cars themselves. The people, you can tell the guy's dog and his wife and everything else. That's fine. You work your way, you have multiple times to talk about these guys through the weekend. But, for a guy in the stands, when somebody rolls up with a, AAA stock automatic Camaro, that's a ZL1. I mean, that's a 69 ZL1 Camaro, and that type of stuff connects with people. I enjoy that stuff. And that first weekend in Gainesville in 2014, I wasn't even supposed to work that race, but the guy that was supposed to be there had some wacko thing where he tried to get the NHRA to pay for his girlfriend to fly to the race, and he tried to use some weird, kind of subterfuge to do it, and they caught him. And they fired him. And so they're like, hey, can you come to Gainesville? I'm like, yeah, sure. So that guy being fired allowed me to get a jump start on things. So thanks, pal. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect.
A lot of this industry, we talk about this on a lot, building cars and stuff, is the right place at the right time. And, I answered the phone call today. So,
yeah.
One of the coolest things I've got to do, because we're BMX people. I've got to do the red carpet interviews for the BMX Hall of Fame induction weekend. Here comes all these people. And the first year I did it, they're like, how did you prep? And I was like, I'm just a nerd. It's like, I know this guy. I know who he rode for in 1985, and he won, the skate park championship. I'm just, I called a fan. Carrie calls me a nerd. So
that's the dream scenario. A situation like that is perfect when you can just let it all kind of hang out as far as the nerd stuff goes and do it in a fun way. And, if you run into that guy in the airport and you start dropping that on him, he's going to look for a place to run. But if you do it on a red carpet, it's like, it's the right time. So that's great. Yeah.
We've got to be friends with, if you're not a BMX person, but Bob Harrow. He basically invented freestyle BMX. Bike company. He doesn't own it anymore. But he come to the BMX Grands one time. And he's in the automotive world. Like, he did marketing and design for the Red Bull Formula One team when they, like, years ago. And
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Here, and there was a shifter cart company that he owned for a while. Then he did. So he does marketing in the automotive world. So we see him at SEMA, we see him at PRI wandering around and stuff. But he came to the BMX Grand Nationals where all the dads know him and are super fans. And we have a pit. We had a banner in the grandstands where our team would sit all the time because we never had our own kids, so we sponsored BMX kids. And we were all down doing something. We look up and say, somebody's sitting in our spot up there in the blanket. And he's sitting there with his hat down. And go up there, it's Bob Harrow. And he's like, man,
wow.
Because, we know each other from seeing at SEMA and PRI at this point. This was a few years ago at the Grands. He goes, I just had to get away from some of these guys. Like, he says, I literally just had a guy ask me, you remember the cover of the Freestyle magazine in May 1986? Why were you wearing different colored shoelaces? And he goes, maybe one broke and another buddy gave me a shoelace. There's no, there's the super fans. Aren't you the one that come up with the term, what is it? Mopar fans are the Star Trek fans of the car world. Wasn't that you?
Yes. 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 Yeah. That was
So,
the equivalent of your demolition derby comment. It did not go over as well as I would have initially imagined, but people have seemed to have adopted it. But they are lovingly
well,
they are.
I say it very rarely do we get Mopars on the autocross and the good guys circuit, but when I do, I usually say that, and I've been giving you credit for it the whole time, as Brian Lohnes would say, so they don't get mad at me.
Right,
They'll
right, yeah.
see you the next time. And Carrie runs, FM3 helps with the Moparty event, and that gets thrown around up there quite a few times too. The Star Trek, yeah.
Steve Dulcich and I did the dyno contest at the Mopar Nationals, like, again, probably 10, 15 years ago now in Columbus, Ohio. And we got done one night. We're in the car driving back. I said, Steve, you're in an odd place when you're the most normal guy here. Like when Steve Dulcich is the most normal guy in the property, you have found a different kind of different part of the human species. And that's what we had discovered that weekend. We had fun. It was just it was an adventure.
Yeah, but I say this often, is like, to the outside world. Like I learned this when I was at the Power Block doing that show, and they did something, or they're like, you have to realize real car people are like a 0.00 something % of the population. Even if you include people that watch NASCAR and Formula One, it's still a very small part of the population. And I just can't understand that, because everybody I grew up was either in the demo cars, stock cars, drag cars, motorcycles, hot rods. I mean, everybody somewhere, your side was, that's just what everybody did. And for somebody to not, I just feel sorry for them. But when you look at people, like you say, like, you take any one of us and put it out in, like, I don't know.
You don't know any other lifestyle.
Yeah, I don't know any other lifestyle. So we're like, you could just be like, we're walking around with a blinking light, like, this guy does not belong here. Like,
yeah.
Okay, we can throw him under the bus. He's probably not going to listen to it anyway. But Freiberger, how he fit in the world of the corporate magazine world for so long, and but it's okay to him wear shorts and flip flops all the time because Gray Baskerville did. It's where, that's why we always like BMX. It's hot rod's kind of the same way. It's where the misfits gather, kind of.
Yeah, and I think if you look back, you look back through whether it's automotive media or just automotive history, like, there are people that are the square peg in the round hole, and it works. And David, David, he's one of my best friends now for probably 20 years, and that approach doesn't fly anymore. In that environment doesn't fly, that exists anymore. Like the one that he grew up in a large part had such a massive effect on and brought it to places it had never been before. Like, he couldn't do that again because there's nowhere to do that again existing. Like when he remade, when he went in there and remade Carcraft, and what he did with Rod and Custom, and then he got the Hot Rod, and even and the other thing is too, you got to think about this guy, whether it was the 4-wheel drive magazines, whether it was the DIY style, Carcraft down and dirty junkyard stuff, whether it was what he did with Hot Rod. I mean, it's a pretty amazing thing that his brain was able to connect with so many people on so many different platforms and in different genres of this stuff. Because, so many people get pigeonholed into, I'm this guy, I'm the Pontiac guy, I'm the drag racer guy, I'm the this, like, it's pretty nuts.
We met him, like, I always kind of knew who he was, but I always just thought he looked like a homeless guy with a camera a little bit. But Street Machine Nationals, the year it was in Indianapolis, 2001, we had a Riviera, and he shot the pictures for the magazine feature for Hot Rod. And then I always thought that he wrote the article. Jeff Koch, it looks like Koch did.
Yeah, Cook, pronounced Cook. Yep.
Which Cook just did our 30th anniversary art for our t-shirts. So it's a big circle. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, and he's an old BMXer too. So
yeah, that's fantastic. That really is cool.
Yeah, our world is really, really small.
Yeah.
We think it's big.
And the overlap from BMX and hot rods and it's a big overlap of that too. So much so that the BMX Hall of Fame Museum, and Gork's going to have me help. They're going to do a thing for the wall on the connection between hot rods and cool. BMX and racing. They've got some stuff on the wall there already because well, Larry Dixon raced for a little bit. Cruz Pedregon raced for a little bit. So they've got, different NASCAR guys and drivers and stuff. So there is some NHRA stuff on the wall there.
Who was the guy from Redline Bikes? Because he raced Top Fuel. The Redline bicycles back in the day. He was a Top Fuel guy. Steve something or other.
That owned Redline?
I thought he was the owner of Redline.
Yes, was Mongoose. Lynn Caston owned Redline.
No, wait a second. Who owned Mongoose?
Skip Hess.
Skip Hess. He was the Top Fuel guy. Skip Hess. Sorry, I had the brand. That's how much I know about BMX bikes. It was Mongoose bikes.
The Tom McEwen Mongoose and the Mongoose, the cartoon, it's the same.
Okay. That makes total sense then.
Yeah. It's the same logo. And there was some that had some early McEwen cars. The Mongoose said BMX products on there real small because it was Mongoose BMX products.
Very cool.
So they were better. Because a lot of those guys that got into BMX, they either made race car parts, motorcycle parts, or sprint car parts. And their kid got into bicycles. So then that's kind of how, that's the tie.
That's neat.
That. Yeah. Fabricators are a fabricator. So,
yeah.
Okay, where were we in this timeline here? So you're starting to do NHRA stuff.
14?
When did you go from? So you're doing sportsman stuff, and if people don't know, it's like there's a TV crew and there's an event crew. So there's different Top Fuel announcer, there's sportsman announcers, there's top end interviewers. When you go to that, it's not the same as what you're watching on TV.
Yeah, so back then.
Let me interrupt you real quick. One more Freiberger story.
Yeah. As
Freiberger is now on the NHRA some stuff, and that's what Carrie says. He looks funny in a polo shirt.
He does.
So I know sometimes I'm gonna have to give in, but working for Good Guys, and I've been doing Good Guys now for like 12 years. And you get your contract, and I read it every year. It's like they're always going to try to put something in there, somebody else in charge, and it's like all staff must wear the Good Guys staff and polo shirt. And every time I call the guy who's in charge of the contract, I'm not wearing a polo shirt. And they're like, oh no, because I just have to wear a Good Guys branded. I get like a button-up work shirt or a t-shirt. Yeah. It's like, I know sometimes I'm going to have to wear I've hosted stuff at SEMA and I wore a suit coat, so I guess I could fold and wear a polo shirt. But we both noticed that, Freiberger looks funny in a polo shirt. So
yeah, all the fans are like, "Oh, you have shoes on." I mean, he's heard that like 61 trillion times to the point where it's like, "Hey, man, don't mention his freaking shoes anymore. Just don't even say it." But he's heard that.
Right?
What's that?
You can't wear flip-flops in the pits, right? You have to have closed-toed shoes, or is that just a myth?
Yeah, when he's going to be when you're around the racetrack and stuff like that. And plus, it just doesn't. They, for better or worse, there is a dress code.
Yeah, I'm not a flip-flop guy though. I'm not.
No, we don't let anybody work in flip-flops
At your guys' events. No.
Seems like it could end bad. Yeah. But so at that time, in the 2014 and 2015 timeframe, the NHRA Pro Mod series, the show actually was made independently. It was made by Ted Jones and Masters Entertainment. And so at like the third race I was at, I was down in the top end, and they're like, "Hey, we don't have a reporter for the top end interviews for the Pro Mod guys. Can you do them?" I'm like, "I guess." So I radioed my boss. I'm like, "I do this." Like, "Yeah, go for it." And so I think it was Ricky Smith and somebody else. And, having known these guys for years at match races and stuff, I said something to set Ricky off, and he flipped out and started screaming at the other guy. And they were like, "This is gold." And so they're like, "You're a guy from now on." I'm like, "All right." So that was my first thing. So I started doing the Pro Mod stuff. And I would just do like the semifinal and winter interviews when they ran the Pro Mod races. But then in 2016, the NHRA brought the television production in-house. And so everything came in-house. And I was like, well, I'm probably screwed now because they have their own people. But they kept me on as part of the Pro Mod show. And so Bruno Massel and I.
Before that, like you say, it was Diamond P was before that. And was Diamond P the ones that did like the ABC Sports? Diamond P was the producer of all that?
Yeah, those network. So back in the day when it would be on the network, the network would actually produce those shows. That was like in the golden age of like people just swimming in, swimming pools full of gold doubloons. They just had money to burn. But then like all the other events, like they probably have 3 or 4 races on like NBC one year, whatever. But then the other events would all be Diamond P. And so, and that was all the way up until ESPN. And when NHRA went to ESPN, even the early years, it was still the Diamond P crew. And then ESPN basically took the whole production over until we went to Fox or until we went in-house. So now the NHRA owns everything. They own the production. So they're actually making the show and effectively handing it to somebody. So that was started in 2016.
In motorsports, because like Supercross, we're big Supercross fans.
Yeah.
The Supercross organization doesn't do. It's Feld Motorsports, same people that put on Monster Jam and everything.
Yeah.
So it's kind of rare for a racing series to do their own all that production, isn't it?
It's actually a lot less rare than you'd think. So like IndyCar makes their own races. That's through IndyCar Productions. NASCAR, that's all NASCAR Productions. Okay. So it's transitioned into that because it's a way to manage the cost and everything. Like it's you have a giant initial expense to buy the equipment and the TV trucks and everything, but then once you own the stuff, it becomes more sensible because, like for instance, like when the NHRA was with ESPN, they didn't own anything. They didn't own they owned the video, of course. They owned the rights to the video, but like once that contract was up, if you didn't sign another deal, you're basically held hostage because what are you going to do? It's like, you can't make this show yourself. Well, so a lot of companies have brought it in-house in that way. And it makes it better for assets and everything else. And the way everything's integrated now for us to be able to, the way the content flows, like if we're making stuff on the TV show that's cool, the social people grab it, and they do tune-ins on it. And, it's all like, it's a crazy kind of integrated world. But yeah, it's that whole thing happened in 2016. I worked on the Pro Mod shows with Bruno in 2016. And then in 17 and 18, I worked.
Talking about shirts and watching this weekend, knowing we were going to have you on the podcast. I mean, can I chip in to get Bruno one size bigger shirt? And the Vandergrift boy,
that would hurt ratings.
A slightly neck size shirt too. Yeah.
So here's what I'm going to tell you. This is inside baseball. Jordan had his shirts taken in. Bruno's shirts. Bruno's a standard cruising model, whatever size he wears, double XL. Guys, he's a huge guy, but Jordan actually had his shirts tailored
to make his arms look tighter.
Yeah, I don't know what they did or where they did it, but he had his plastic rayon, whatever the hell they're made of, polo shirts taken in a little bit. So he can pull it off. I can't. Yeah.
They're good looking men. I can just say
listen, they're good. The guy was on The Bachelor. What are you going to do? Yeah.
Oh, was he really?
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's one of his, I don't say this with derision, but like people recognize him. Like we go out to eat on the weekend, we get done Friday, Saturday night, we go and sit down somewhere. And almost every time we sit somewhere, they're like, "Hey, were you on The Bachelorette?" It's like, yeah, I never realized how big that show was until you're with somebody who was on it. And yeah, he was on there. Yeah.
And the rest of you guys sitting at the table, been on TV for all these years, and it's like, they don't even know who you guys are.
Yeah, they're like drag racing. Like, what is drag racing? It's like, just go watch The Bachelorette. Leave us alone. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So I learned something tonight. Yeah. So yeah.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, but yeah, Bruno could use one more bigger shirt.
I'll let you tell him that.
Yeah, he doesn't. I always talk to him, because Bruno does a great job, and he's a hardcore champion racer too.
Yeah, 4 times over. Yeah,
I'm a fan of Bruno. So
no, good dude, great racer, and yeah, he's got some stuff coming up that's pretty cool too. But yeah, he's been with the NHRA shows, I think 15 years now. I think he started somewhere around 2010 doing stuff with your ESPN back in the day. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so where were we again? We lose our track.
You keep interrupting.
I do. It's like it's my ADHD. It's like, I got to ask this question real quick. So
I think we're talking like in 2017 and 18. I worked as a pit reporter at I didn't do it every race, but I worked a bunch of races as a pit reporter, which I really liked. And then at the end of the 2018 season, they offered me the play-by-play job, which is what I've been doing since 2019. So me and Tony Pedregon have done over 100 race days together. And if you count all of our shows, we've probably done close to 400 shows with all of our qualifying shows and everything else. So it's a good partnership. I love Tony.
Yeah, you guys do a great job.
Yeah, and it was Gainesville the first time I came down there, and that was, I don't know what year that was, but I just remember you guys next door and how loud Tony, like I'm a loud talker, but Tony talks really loud when he's to get his, you know, his energy up.
Yeah.
And they gotta play with his volumes. And I swear, wasn't he standing on a milk crate?
No, he's never stood on a milk crate. Now I'm going to not name them, but we have had people come in that wanted to stand on something to maintain the appearance of being not a munchkin. And I can respect that. But so yeah, he's never done it. But we have had other drivers come in that, you know, again, most competitive race car drivers are small people. Like you don't want to have a big old, you know, you don't want to have some big, you know, corn-fed guy weighing your race car down. So most race car drivers tend to be smaller people. But yeah, there's been one or two that have said, you got a apple box or something to stand on. And it's like, yeah, we can do that if you want. Yeah.
Maybe I seen the apple box in the room. Maybe is what I seen before. So maybe I don't know.
I think you just make stuff up.
No, you're good.
It's funny. The funniest thing about that whole scene you're talking about is people think I'm really tall because he's a smaller guy, and I'm not really taller than anybody in my life but him. So like when we're doing our stand up, you know, I'm like 5'10", and I think he goes 5'7" or 5'8". So it kind of looks like I'm, you know, oh, this guy must be 6 feet tall or something like that. And so when I see people in the pits like, man, you look so much taller on camera. I'm like, well, yeah, I work next to a guy who's like a 3/4 size human. So that's why I look tall. Yeah.
And you see him next to Reinhardt. Reinhardt's as tall as I am. He's a tall guy.
Yeah. And it's just the opposite there. At that point, he's, you know, Alan would be slouching down and I'd be standing on my tippy toes to make it not look like, you know, twins with Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito. Yeah.
We instantly know which one he is. Then we didn't think he was Schwarzenegger, did we? No.
No.
Well, I wouldn't say Reinhardt's Schwarzenegger either. He's just tall. So how many years you been on the TV now?
So this would be I guess technically our 7th season. So I started if you count the 2019 season, this would be the 7th actual season. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we're adamant tuner inners. Yeah, it was like, oh, we're gonna watch a movie. She goes, drag racing's on, and she flipped over to drag racing Sunday. We watched it. Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's been a great start to the season. We've had some really entertaining races, and you know all the craziness that happened with Caps and Phoenix, and you know Pomona was really fast, and we had some great upsets in Funny Car. And you look at what you know Greg Anderson and Dallas Glenn are just completely dominating pro stock right now. So there's a couple of really good storylines. You know, we go to Vegas in a couple of weeks. It's always a really fun race, 4 wide. So that's always interesting. But it's been a good way to start the year.
I've never seen 4 wide in person, and I know some racers, and like a lot of the racers, what I hear is like, oh, it would be good as an exhibition. Maybe we shouldn't have it as a points thing because it's really hard. Because like in nitro cars, it's 2, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong. It's nitro. I mean, they're driving a bomb, and we have friends that's won. When there was 3 hot rod reunions, he's won all 3 driving to pure hell. Brian Hope's our local friend.
Brian Hope. Oh yeah. Brian's a fantastic guy.
Yeah. And they're bringing a race car seat over for me to fix for his son's UDRL car. And then Brian's wife does all the printing and stuff for like the door decals and packets and stuff. For Carrie's company. So yeah, we go to concerts with them and everything. They live a half hour from us here. And I got sidetracked.
Yeah, where are you going with that?
Well, he's won all 3, and then just being around them with nitro, and like I'm over there helping them get ready for one of the races, and they're like, "Here, you're going to take these engine sleeves for our Donovan 417 and just grind this notch out right here. Here's the other sleeve." I go, "I'm not an engine guy." He's like, "Oh, it's all nitro. We don't know if it's going to stay together anyway."
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's here for a good time, not a long time. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the.
They didn't break down. They didn't blow the motor up that weekend after I ground the sleeves on it for them. So they're like,
so you were talking about the 4 wide.
Oh yeah, the 4 wide. But like usually like they'll pedal it a couple times or it pops. I can't catch that guy that's ahead of me or girl. in 4 wide, they don't know what's going on in the other lanes over there. So it's way more dangerous for the drivers, isn't it?
It's in a way mechanically maybe more dangerous. There's a separator wall, so you have 2 lanes, a wall down the center, and then 2 lanes. So for your point, you're right. You have, if you're in lane 1, you really have no idea what's going on in lane 4. And I always tell people, I said, listen, the cold reality is this: things that are bad for the racers are great for TV. Okay, so like, if something blows up and goes haywire, that makes good TV. If some guy gets beat on a whole shot and wants to go slap the other guy around at the top end, that's good for TV. So I will say this, the 4 wide thing, which is, I think we're 15 years into it now, is proven itself in the fact that when Vegas was a 2 wide racetrack, the spring race was usually a very light crowd, and then the fall race would always be a banger because it's right around SEMA. Everybody's in town having fun. When they added the other 2 lanes, the place instantly became a sellout style crowd. In Charlotte, the 4 wide race in the spring is always huge, and then we go in the fall and it's like there's crickets. And that's why they've actually made the fall race now a 4 wide as well. So we have 3 of them this year for the first time ever. And
I don't think okay.
Yeah, we announced that in the off season, and that race is actually in the countdown, which is our kind of playoff, comes at a very critical time of the year. So I get it. And I do understand, like, there are people that are purists about it and like, hey, this isn't drag racing. This is some freak show thing. And I get it. But at the same time, like, if you're filling the grandstands, like, that's all I got to know. I mean, at the end of the day, we need full racetracks, and we need people buying tickets and hanging out, and people watching on TV like crazy as well. So, yeah.
And back in the day, I've seen pictures. I don't know what track it was, but there was a track that there were front engine dragsters, so it was clear back then that they ran like 6 wide as an exhibition or something like that. It was a California track.
So I know at Irwindale they raced jets 4 wide back in the day, but I think the picture you're referencing, it was actually from Byron, Illinois, and they ran top fuel cars versus stock. There were 2 cars. There were lanes 1 and 3 were 2 stock eliminator cars, and lanes 2 and 4 were 2 top fuel dragsters. And they let the stock eliminator guys have, I think, a 10-second head start. And then they launched these top fuel cars. And you can see it's done in kind of a sequential photography deal. It's insane. I mean, and there's no walls anywhere. It's just like the most insanely dangerous thing ever, but it's a killer series of photos.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some crazy stuff, crazy history of, I don't know if Bang Shift shared it or what, but I always heard, and I'd seen pictures online before growing up, not far from Chicago, that they actually raced indoors on Navy Pier.
Yeah. So I did a YouTube, kind of a large YouTube video on that. And it, I was interested in it because I knew it happened once or twice, but it happened for like 5 winters, and it was like a series. They would run multiple races a year, and they actually set up a road course in that building and ran a road race inside that thing one winter as well. And it's fascinating because, Arnie Bezzo could go there. Dick Messina would be there with Shake, Rattle, and Roll. Like, some real deal cars would show up and a lot of street cars, but you got to believe just
the Messinas, they come to the Tri-5 Nationals every year, and Dick's down there, and I always brag on him because, seeing that Shake, Rattle, and Run car as a little kid being a Tri-5, it was like the coolest car ever. And still seeing the original car, they bring 3 cars to the Tri-5s and run. And, now they got Kevin Lawrence.
Yes.
Used to drive Pro Stock for a little bit.
Yes.
And I'm bragging. The first year they had Kevin Lawrence there, and I'm just going off. And it's like, Kevin Lawrence, Midwest, drag race legend, and race this and that. And he gets out of the car after he runs, and he comes up to the tower, and he goes, I got to see. Nobody knows who I am anymore. How do you know? I was like, oh, Cordova, I seen you this, and I seen you that. And he's like, oh, cool, man. So now he remembers me and comes up and, hugs me and stuff now. It's like, yeah, there's my cheering crowd. He said.
Dick Messina, that guy has led a pretty incredible life. And he's got stories that'll curl your toes. But if you get a chance to talk to him next year, he and his friends borrowed, i.e. stole, a car one night when they were just having some fun in Chicago. And so they're driving around and they pop the trunk open and it's full of neckties. There's all these neckties in the trunk of this car. And they realize that there's a guy, he's a weather guy in Chicago on TV that is known for his wacky neckties. And every night he puts on a new necktie to do his weather report. Well, guess whose car they had stolen? This guy's car. And so he'll tell you the whole story in detail, but they then proceeded to put on a bunch of the neckties and drive around town with a convertible top down all night. So yeah, that guy's a legend.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, that's awesome. So you may not be able to answer this, and if you say I don't want to talk about it, what do you think now? IHRA, they're trying to grow again. They're bringing back more field stuff. They've hired a bunch of announcers and stuff, and they're buying tracks. What do you? I mean, I think competition is good.
Yep.
What do you think about that?
I think you have to take a pretty wide look at it, and I think the bottom line is that if these guys can be successful at what they want to do, it means that you're going to have more people racing. It means you're going to have more stability at some of these racetracks. And look, a bunch of those racetracks that they're looking to purchase are places that are hanging in the balance. Like Milan Dragway has gone out of business 58 times since I've been alive. I don't want that place to leave. It's right near Detroit. It's a historic place. It needs some stability. It needs somebody with some financial wherewithal to invest some money into it and keep it afloat. So, if you don't get caught in the weeds of like getting wound up about the badge you wear in your chest, and you can look at it for what it is for drag racing, if these guys can be successful, and that is my want, I want them to be successful. It means that you're going to have stable racetracks, and you're going to have more participation, and you're going to have fresh ideas. And to your point, it is always good to have competition. It's good to have constructive competition that is not designed to be a zero-sum game, to whatever, like to wipe somebody else off the map. But it is good to have constructive. Like when I was with IHRA back in the day and Bill Bader owned it, it was all about, he had a great sense of pride. He instilled it in us. It was, his motto was IHRA and damn proud of it. Like it was that type of stuff. And the idea wasn't like, we're going to go put NHRA out of business. The idea was like, we're going to do the best job we can do. And we're going to beat them at some stuff. And we're going to be their annoying little brother. And we're going to annoy them and poke them in the side and show them how good we can be and what we can do. And that was always great. And so I kind of hope the same thing materializes in that way.
Yeah, and then like I hate the doomsday people when you see event coverage on social media. Oh, look at the crowd. Drag racing's dying. Those people have not been to a race in the last 5 years. I guarantee you they have not. Yeah,
they haven't. And it's people that don't understand. They don't understand what the actual sport looks like now. And my two sons, right? These guys are of the age where it's like they live social, and YouTube is where they consume a lot of their media. And, races like TX2K, FL2K, like there's loads of these events around the country that are capturing a huge audience. And the fact of the matter is, this is a sport that has always changed and evolved and moved. And, the whole kids aren't into cars. It's like, bro, like, and the one person who's going to look you in the eye and tell you that the kids aren't into cars is usually like 70 years old. And it's like, bro, you don't know what the kids are into. Like, you don't know, and probably you don't want to know half the stuff they're into, but you don't want to know what the kids are into. And so there's that. I had a guy one time, this is actually not even that long ago. We were in Arizona a couple of weeks ago, and we had great crowds. And the guy said, hey man, I didn't hear on the radio. Like they usually advertise this race all over the radio. I said, well, I don't know. The place is full. I guess that's what, that seems, whatever we're doing seems to be working. And I asked him what channel he listens to, and it's a classic rock channel, which I would have expected. He's an older guy. And it's like, we know we got you. Like you didn't need to hear it to show up this year. But like some dude, some guy we might have grabbed on Instagram, or some guy we might have grabbed in some other, form of media. So I think there's a part of that, like to your point, Tim, it's like, yeah, these kids aren't into cars. Drag racing is dying. They just don't know where to look to see where things are happening and how the sport's growing and changing. And God forbid, it's never going to be as good as when they did anyway. So why bother? Yeah.
And that's the key, is that you said it's changing, and that group of people don't like change. So they don't want it. They want it to be the way that it's always been, what they're used to, rather than what's coming up and what's new.
Yeah, the times are over when three buddies out of high school can pool in $1,500 total and go racing for the summer. That's kind of over, unless you have a uncle, relative, somebody's going to give you a car. Like we're actually starting a new segment by the time it won't be out by the time this airs. That we're going to do on another day of the week. 30 and under industry people, builders, racers, painters, whatever. And like the one that we have coming on, he's a photographer. He's 16. He loves Formula Drift. What's his name? Larry Chen has taken him. Larry Chen, right?
And
has taken him under.
Legend.
Gets him out. He gets to go out and shoot Formula Drift events with Larry. And, he's just, that's what and he has a hot rod. It's a 90 or 94 Mercedes wagon with a V8 in it. That's his hot rod.
Nice.
It's cool. It's
That's
really,
awesome.
we're just starting on it. At a 16-year-old, like we get reminded because the BMX kids we sponsor, and we talk about movies and music, and Lily goes, "Are you telling me stories from the 1900s again?" It hurts. It's true, but yeah,
it's true.
Yeah. Like I bought my Chevelle for $200. That you're not going to buy a 283 4-speed hop in and go car for that anymore.
No, to me, the people I look at that I really respect, and when I look at older people, I look at the Joe Amatos of the world and some of these other guys that are they're living their life, but they're also popping out and hanging out with us at the races, 6-8 times a year, and they're cool in that. It's not like, well, these guys, when I was doing it, they're still amazed by what they're looking at, and they're still impressed by what they're seeing, and it's like that's the guy I need to make sure I am. When I'm that guy's age, I need to be that guy, not the dude who's crying about how everything's changed and I don't like the music anymore. Like Joe Amato's like walking around going, "Man, you guys are badass. This is bitching." Like, "Oh, wow, this is cool." It's like, okay, there's hope for us all. Yeah.
And there's still. So give me your the drag and drive events have really blown up in the last 10 years, and I know you're on the mic for Drag Week. I've never been to Drag Week. That's one of my things. I'd like to participate. Me and my dad always said we want to build a Drag Week car. Like, I remember when it got really nuts. We were laying in bed one time when it was like the first day of Drag Week, and I'm over there on my phone in bed, and I'm laughing. And she goes, "What are you watching?" She's thinking it's a cat video, And I'm like, pro mods on interstates pulling trailers, So it's came a long ways, but it's very impressive. And one of my favorite stories was when Yanni Lindbergh.
Johnny and the Australian Richie Crampton.
They put that motor and they run the fuel injection down and take the blower belt off, and was the shit box of doom or what they call it.
That was a 1957 station wagon, and had a blown alcohol, had a water jacketed Noonan water jacket billet block with the same cylinder heads and supercharger they run on an alcohol funny car. And they took the burst panel out of the front of the intake manifold and bolted the throttle body to it. And they stuck a breaker bar in the pulleys of the blower so it wouldn't rotate, just auto rotate going down the road. And they freaking drove this thing around, and they'd slip the belt on it. I think it went somewhere in the 6s by the time they were done with it, like some ungodly 200 some miles an hour.
But there was a crazy rule on that Richie Crampton at that time was driving Top Fuel, and Yanni Lindbergh was driving an alcohol funny car. And at the NHRA tracks, Crampton couldn't drive it because he didn't have a funny car license. Yanni had to drive it.
Correct. So Richie didn't have there's like an advanced ET license that he didn't have. He had the Top Fuel license. It was some weird paperwork freaking glitch thing. But that was why Johnny had to drive the thing. But
so speaking of NHRA tracks, there was a time it was just a joke, and I really thought it was a joke to him. It wasn't a joke to me. That we're friends with Larry Dixon, and he has that Nova that he races, and he's done Drag Week some. Well, during that time when he was not allowed, they didn't have an NHRA license for him. That's a whole nother podcast that when we get him on, we'll talk about that. Yeah. I was like, "Dude, I'll go with you." He goes, "I'm not going to win my class at Drag Week." He goes, "Why don't you ride with? Then you can drive at the NHRA tracks." yeah, I never got the phone call to actually do that. I think it was just a joke to him, but I was like, I'll go with you, Larry. So, yeah.
Yeah, that Nova he has is cool, and he's got a new car coming together. But the coolest thing about the drag and drive stuff is that you can do it at any level you want. Like you still have guys showing up in stuff that'll that is very mild, that'll run 14, 15 seconds, and they have as much fun and as much respect as really anybody else. It's to me at this point, you got to look at like saturation of events, and to me, or who you are, like there's I think 50 of these things now. And so at some point you kind of reach a level of saturation, which maybe we're there now. And it's not a bad thing. I mean, it's an amazing thing to think about something that's so popular. You have the ability to do it at 50 different times in some form or fashion around the country. But yeah, I was at the very first drag week in 2005. It's one of the, Forrest Gump moments of my life. But yeah, 38 cars showed up, and Larry Larson didn't win. That's a lot of people think Larry Larson won all those races. He ended up winning a bunch, but he did not win the first one. It was a guy out of Oklahoma that won it in a Nova with a big nitrous motor in it, and he would bolt the windows in and out of it every day. They would swap the center section out of the rear end every day, whether they were racing or driving, and they would swap a single 4-barrel carburetor on a little cast intake manifold to go down the highway, and then they would put a giant fabricated dual Dominator intake manifold with all the nitrous plumbing into it when they would race the thing. And it was an amazing week. It was, nobody had ever done anything like this before, and just to see cars with big tires and all this stuff hanging out of them. I got to ride in Larson's Nova when it was pink. It had a Lenko in it on the road. It was just wild. It was cool.
Yeah, so getting to the events, you've probably got to ride in a lot of cars like that.
Yeah, it's funny. Over the years, like in the earlier years, I would pop in and kind of ride with guys. And in the last several years working with David, it's like we kind of like we're either sometimes at night we have a commitment where we got to make a video or do some other stuff. So we either, when Dodge was sponsoring, we had a red eye Hellcat. That was awesome. We just pounded that thing into dust all week long. But a lot of times we're in the back of a minivan or in a Suburban somewhere taking pictures of everybody else's cool stuff. But it's kind of the nature of the business. Yeah,
because if you're riding with a race car, there's not a guarantee the guy on the microphone's going to show up if that race car breaks down.
Yeah, that guy spits the rods out in a cornfield. I'm going to be stuck there with him. Yeah, that's a fact. Yeah,
you're going to be here. I'll be on the phone. Tell me play by play what's going on.
So you've got to experience a lot of events. What is your favorite? Like what event or track do you like? Like you just get excited because you're going to.
For me, I think as far as the drag race goes, like the ultimate, U.S. Nationals for me is still like the ultimate drag race. It's just so big and takes 6 days to complete, and it has such prestige and history attached to it. That's for me as far as a drag racing event. That's definitely like the pinnacle peak thing. I mean, there's stuff I still would love to do, and I have, in other genres just to try stuff out.
That would be our second question. What would you like to do that you have not got to do yet? It could be anywhere around the world. Like, I want to announce at Goodwood or something like that. So,
what I'd like to do is call boxing. I love boxing. Yeah. I've loved boxing since I was a kid. I would love a shot. I would love a shot to call some boxing at some point. I think it would be fun. I've always enjoyed reading, boxing has a lot of great writers and it's had a lot of great announcers attached to it. But man, in terms of racing stuff, I would kill to get to Goodwood. That's definitely like super high on my list. Bonneville was a place I always wanted to go, and I got to go there for the better part of 10 years with Bank Shift. But Goodwood. Yeah. The Goodwood revival would definitely be very, very high on my list. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to go back to the boxing thing. So did you do the play-by-play for the most recent Mike Tyson fight at home?
No, that was horrendous. That's the thing. It's horrible to listen to. Some of those guys, it's just bad. I mean, you go back, there's some really, Jim Lampley was a great boxing announcer who did NHRA drag racing several years when it was on ABC, I guess. So I don't know. There's something about and again, boxing and drag racing go down to the same thing. It's typically a two-person contest. It's a confrontation, and it's just I don't know. It's a lot of drama to it.
So I'm not going to throw anybody to the bus, but one of the first times when I got to come down and do some sportsman at an NHRA event, there was a person that wasn't too welcoming to me. And he's like, well, just because you've done some stuff, why do you think you can be here? He goes, just because I'm a huge fan of basketball doesn't mean that I could do the Sweet 16, that, I don't know what the college. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't think, I think you're wrong, because this guy is, to me, an amazing announcer, and he could do whatever. Like, you could do amazing at boxing, especially if you know it and you're a fan of it. Like this guy, I think he would kill it doing the basketball announcing. I really think he would. So, but yeah, if you do other things and you're a fan of it, that's why I can do some BMX stuff and some car stuff, because you're going to have me. Well,
if you're knowledgeable,
the Kentucky Derby, I think that would be fun. Yeah.
If you're knowledgeable and passionate, and you, like you said, you have either an innate knowledge of it or the willingness to study it, then you can be good at it. I mean, I feel like the basic tools are the basic tools. And if you can look beyond the obvious. I always think that's what makes, when people ask me, like, what can I work on? And when they sent I do this program with NHRA called the Drag Race Announcers Group, and people send videos in, and I do some critique work and stuff. And I always tell people, just look beyond the obvious. Like, take one step ahead of, okay, yes, you told me the car is purple, but what else about this thing is unique and cool? What else? And if you don't know, then that's when you have to start asking questions. Like, if you don't know any of the guy's backstory, if you don't know this stuff, that's the thing. And if you're like a naturally curious person, which I think I am, if you're like a naturally curious person, that's what kind of leads you to be good at any job when you're trying to tell a story or describe things to people. Yeah.
I go around, I get to do the Tri-5 Chevy National. So it's not a huge, so I have to do other stuff at the event. So I'm basically announcing the feature cars, the paid cars, the historic cars, which I get one of the old guys up there, is the, what is that group? I am blank tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, the early cars that raced in the 60s and the small block Tri-5s, and every weekend somebody's setting a new record. Well, there's 30 of these guys that come, and it's like a rolling museum. But for all the feature cars, I have Jeff Lutz down pat, and I have Massino down pat, because they come every year. But then for the new person come, and I'm there on setup day, so I take them a piece of paper. Hey, fill out, give me some stuff to talk about on the microphone. And they're like, oh, sometimes somebody will hand me a hero card. But the Messinas, the first year, they wrote like a book. Dick did this, and this is this car, and this was Pro Mod car, and this is the driver. And it's like, and I keep it from year to year, so then I have stuff to talk about. So, but I also like to learn. And the hardest thing at these good guys events is it's the same 60 cars over and over and over all day. And it's like, they get tired of me talking about the same thing, and it's difficult. I mean, you got 45 seconds to talk about one car. So it's not like you have to come up with a whole lot of stuff to talk about.
But yeah, the repetition of seeing it 8-10 times a day, that's where it gets hard.
Yeah. But then it's racing at a car show. So the spectators come and go. So the participants that are sitting there all day racing, they get tired of me talking about, like when Kyle Tucker was racing, Kyle Tucker's done this, this, and this. And they're like, can you talk about something else? I was like, well, that person in the stand's only been there for a half hour. Then they're going to go back, and that's the only chance to hear about Kyle Tucker.
And they have a tendency just to turn the speakers off.
Yeah, some of our regulars will unplug the speaker that is closest by them, so they like to listen to me all day long.
That's great.
Okay, so we've talked about what he wants to do, and where do you see drag racing going in 10 years? What do you think it's going to? We're already at 1,000 feet. We had a really good guest on last week, Tyler Spear. He's a nitro boat racer. That's a really good podcast to go back. And now he is the first guy on boats that do an injected nitro. And he's talking to drag racers. Is it Randy Meyer? He's been on.
Randy Meyer.
Helped him. And he says, I call him up and he's like, what do you want, Bolt Boy? And he says, when Randy Meyer told me, you're wasting your time, just keep running normal nitro and then the alcohol class. So he says, when he told me it was a waste of my time, now I have to do it. So he's the only guy running injected nitro on boats right now. So that's a really good podcast to listen to. Yeah. So we have that.
Yeah, really...
They're running injected nitro. There's 1 or 2 teams, right, that's doing it in funny car right now.
Yeah, there's about 6 of them across the country. 2 of them have been making a bunch of headlines. So those are the ones you've been hearing about. Randy's car and Sean Bellamure's car that's owned by Tony Bartone. John's car reset, all the class records and went out there and kind of blew everybody out of the water at Gainesville. And so, yeah, they've allowed that combination in top alcohol dragster for many years. They just allowed it about 2 years ago in funny car. And it takes time. I mean, there's several teams have tried. Now people have begun to find success with it. So I think that'll probably bring more people, into it, which is a good thing. And that was what the intention was. The intention was to give people another option. Instead of having to run a blown methanol engine, you can now do this. It's way cheaper, believe it or not, to run an injected nitro motor than it is to run a blown alcohol engine. It's way lower RPM. Assuming things are tuned right, it can get 4 to 5 times the number of runs out of the parts that are inside the engine. And, there are guys that say you can run basically 3 seasons of a blown alcohol car for you can run 3 seasons of an injected nitro car for what it'll cost to run 1 with a blown alcohol car. So weirdly, nitro in this situation is a budget option. Now, when you put a supercharger on it, that all changes. That all changes. And that's
Tyler,
one false step away from being pro. Yeah.
With a blown nitro, he's got 1,000-foot record at 310 on water, and quarter miles. What is it? I forget, but he holds that record also. And
crazy.
So speaking of that, now they're running over 300 mile an hour in an eighth of a mile. We're at 1,000 foot for nitro cars. Do you think we'll see them shorten fuel cars again ever?
No, there's no real reason to. I mean, the tire's good to 350 miles an hour per Goodyear. I don't think you're ever going to see it go back to a quarter mile, but we've been doing this for how many? Yeah. I mean, more than 15 years now. But the big thing is always going to be the tire and what the tire is safe to. And Goodyear is stamped on that thing that said that it'll go 350 without a problem. So until we start to talk about that, which is way on the horizon, when we're occasionally seeing funny cars. It's only happened twice, but occasionally seeing funny cars, get to 340 miles an hour. Dragster has never done it. We got 338 and change last weekend. We've had several runs close to 339, but there's no. The only changes you'd see, I think, going forward would be more budgetary than performance restrictive. If they ever decided to limit the cars in any way, it would be more to try to lower the cost of competing than it would be to try to physically slow the cars down for any sort of safety reason.
Yeah. Huh. Okay, that's good to know. I always question that. It's like, yeah, they're running.
You were just talking about it.
Yeah. And I don't know if it was one of your podcasts or somebody, or I read it, that somebody was talking about when they were in college, their physics professor knew that this guy was a drag racer. And he says there's, older guy. So it was a long time ago. Aerodynamics and tire technology, like you just said, just came a long way. There's no way a car is ever going to go over 200 mile an hour in the quarter mile. Like this was a college professor, like in the 60s or something, telling me like that.
Yeah, and that was a very common kind of outlook at that time, and it wasn't limited to one guy. That was really what the established science said. But the problem was, it was all based on the idea of the tire having a traction factor of 1, and it was the variable that was wrong in their math. And I went through this a little bit. I did a video on this guy, Scotty Fenn, who built dragster chassis for years, and said he actually maintained at the time the cars that were going 200 weren't actually going that fast. The guy was a total nut. But the math was disproven because the tire actually had a higher level of grip than what would be considered a 1-to-1 ratio. I'm saying this in a basic term, but the tires had more traction than they thought possible, and that's why the cars were faster than they were. And obviously, they've gotten better and better with time. But yeah, it's a fun thing. And the hot rodders, they lived and died on that. They loved it. Like, the slide rule guys said, you'll never go 180, you'll never go 190, you'll never go 200. And that was always a great thing when they kept kind of defeating the scientists. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we've covered most of the drag race stuff. So let's touch base before we wrap this up on all the podcasts you do. You do the Dorkomotive one. You don't put them out very often, and you take, like I said, you did one on the Ferris wheel, and there was Ferris and the Gale Company. Uncle Jim worked at the Gale Company in Galesburg, Illinois, and back in the day, there was around the city square, there was a Ferris wheel that was up. I don't know if they took it down in the 70s or something like that, maybe.
Yeah.
So that was like, oh, I want to listen to this. And I'm on a road trip by myself, and I listened to 2.5 hours or whatever it was on the Ferris wheel and the one that they built for the World's Fair. It was absolutely incredible. And I could tell you get really nerdy about that stuff, of something that nobody thinks of. There's a million hot rod and drag race podcasts and all that stuff. But yeah, you picked like the most random topic and then just go off on it.
It's it's fun because, like, just when you think you got it, like, you think like you start reading the story, like, and then it's like you'll see a little like footnote or something in a book, and it just gives you, like, you go onto this little side path, and it's like, wait a second, this guy freaking stole this idea from somebody, and then now I got to figure out who he stole the idea from, and then I'm looking at this guy, and that to me is the really fun part, and then you try to collate it all into a package where you can tell the story. And I do need, so basically I've not transitioned into YouTube, which I do mostly YouTube stuff now, but I have all the audio from those YouTube videos that I'm going to be uploading as Dorkomotive podcast, so you can listen to them when you're driving down the road. But yeah, it's really fun. The history of the headlights, I don't know if you listened to that one, the headlight one where they kept blowing up the carbine headlights they would make acetylene gas, and that the factories kept blowing up in the middle of Indianapolis, and one of them was next to a hospital. I mean, it's just stuff you can't even make up. Yeah.
I listened to part of that one because one of the guys that was involved in that, wasn't he one of the early owners of the Indy Motor Speedway?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Allison. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the guys that founded the Speedway. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm an Indy
nerd.
Indy 500 nerd history too, which I can't wait. The museum just reopened today. Did you see that? Seen some videos. It looks incredible.
Yes, it does look amazing. Same thing. I saw some videos on social. It looks unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm a nerd.
See, I do the
nerd for drag racing,
Dorkomotive stuff.
I'm just nerd for BMX. Nerd for music. He's just a nerd.
You married a nerd. Yeah. I wasn't like the glasses nerd that became a tech billionaire. I was not. I picked the wrong thing to be. Yeah. For this, I'm just Ron Burgundy. Carrie does all the setup, and I just show up to talk. So
yeah.
There you go. It works. It works.
Yeah. So check him out on the Dorkomotive, and then you've also done some with John McGann, the Hot Rod podcast.
Yeah, happy to report Hot Rod podcast is coming back in a big way for this year. Hot Rod, they've now become a member of the Hearst family of media, so they're part of Hearst magazines now, and the Hearst people really like where that was going, so they've gone and reinvested in that deal. So we're going to be cranking a lot of those out from my understanding, some cool spots. I think we're going to do some stuff with NASCAR. It's going to be very varied, which is certainly something I like. So that's looking forward to that. Yeah.
That's one more topic we can touch on real quick, and then we'll let you go here. Is we hear the stuff, and same with you being in the industry, when things change. We heard about the magazines being sold long ago. I'm friends with McGann, and I reach out to him, and he's like, oh, I'm sure he's signed NDAs that he can't talk about it and all that stuff until it becomes actual news. And yeah, there's a lot of changing with the Motor Trend shows and all that stuff. And a lot of people don't know that those are kind of two separate entities, and especially now that Hearst bought the magazine side. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's in my estimation, having been around it as a freelancer and a contributor and stuff now for 20 years, it's the best thing that could have happened. I mean, they went from having ownership of basically a television company that was, looking at a magazine brand that they didn't know what to do with, or a magazine branch they didn't know what to do with, to a company that makes magazines. And the last kind of great bastion of this in America is where they landed. And I'm not just saying it because a bunch of my friends work there, but I honestly think it's the best thing that could have happened for them, because they're dealing with people who understand the business that they're in. They're not dealing with entertainment company executives that are more concerned about a television rating than the quality of the content or what the direction of the thing's going to be. And, John McGann, spectacular guy. I love working with him. Mike Galimi is one of my best friends. He's kind of the guy that runs that brand over there now. And, KJ Jones. I mean, we go down the list of people that are our friends that work there and do great work. And now that they're doing it for a company that is behind them and is investing in stuff, and Power Tour is going to be back better than ever. Drag Week's coming back. It's like there were questions, right? There were questions of, did they keep the events division? Did they do this? And all that stuff's back, and they've bought into it.
Power Tour, so they're nervous. So we had Tom Vogely on a few episodes ago, and he started with Tom McMullen himself hired him back when they started Street Rodder, and then he was part of that group, and then left and worked for Boy, and then come back. The history of that then they got sold again, and then it got sold again, and all those magazines have been through some change. This is the new one, but I agree with you. I think it's the best option right now for that.
Yeah, it was not looking great where they were. You know what I mean? It wasn't looking great, and it's like a bunch of a bunch of our mutual friends that were all involved in productions with that company that they just got wiped off the face of the map because at the end of everything, the Discovery Warner Brothers thing, there is billions of dollars of debt there, and they did what any business does in the modern world is like they just start looking at the line items on things, go, okay, that's gone, this is gone. Hearst is still a family-owned business. A lot of people don't know that. Like, Hearst is owned by the Hearst family. Like, there is actual people named Hearst that come to the office every day that have their name with a little plate on the door. And yes, it's a big company, but I feel like it's almost a giant full circle. Like, it is a very Peterson-esque style there in that big, powerful organization, but there is actual somebody with vision and leadership at the top of it.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah.
One more question. Your weird love for tractors, and you've been known to wear your International Harvester hat a lot.
Sure. Yeah, my dad growing up had a 52.8N front end loader that I just loved as a kid, and I've always thought they looked cool. I love the fact that they're just yeoman vehicles. They're not fancy, they're not flashy. I've always just liked the idea that they're designed to be durable and tough and weather the elements and start when it's too cold and not boil over when it's too hot and just kind of work. I don't know. I just like the fact that they're simple and beautiful in their own way. If you don't know what you're looking at, they all look the same. It's kind of like drag racing. If you don't know what you're looking at, it's just two cars going in a straight line. And if you don't know what you're looking at, every farm tractor looks like every other farm tractor. But when you do know what you're looking at, it's a lot of details and cool stuff and a lot of history and that type of thing.
Yeah, I grew up on a farm, and the old tractors that I would drive was an Alice Chalmers WD. And then my dad had one here recently, and I thought he was going to restore it. It ran around the farm. My dad's got a farm, and he went home and was like, "Where's the Alice Chalmers?" He goes, "Oh, I sold it." I kind of thought that would be mine someday, but I guess no. I mean, I still get the Nomad, so it's okay, but I don't really need the Alice Chalmers.
It's okay.
Yeah, and like tractors, that's a whole nother nerd world too. There was a guy in Ohio that he passed away, and there was a 5-day auction with 5 auctioneers or 4 auctioneers. One day, the tractor day, RFD TV was there live, and
Minneapolis Tractor Fever, baby, I love that show.
Art Deco tractors, some of them sold for stupid money, but yeah, you can get nerded out in the tractor world too. So,
yeah. Mm-hmm. So I have one more last question for you.
Sure.
So, you spend a lot of time on the road, and you spend a lot of time in airplanes. So what does Brian Lohnes do in an airplane? Are you the social butterfly? Are you the put your podcast on or put your headphones on and ignore everybody? Do you watch movies? What do you do on your airplane rides? Because you probably spend half your life on the airplane.
I read books and take notes for whatever project I'm working on at the time. So I love to read. I've loved to read since I was a kid, and so I chew up books and make notes for whatever weird thing I'm trying to figure out next.
And are you that social butterfly? Will you talk to the person sitting next to you?
It really depends. It's like that is a definite first impression thing. Like if I look at you and it seems like it's going to be weird, the earbuds are going in and I'm locked down, and we're going to be fine with each other, but we're not going to do that. We're not going to chat. But if you're cool and you sit down and it seems like, hey, everything's neat, then yeah, I have no problem having a conversation with my seatmate. But most of the time it's earbuds in, eyes down.
Yeah, I have big headphones on. I have cordless kicker headphones. That's when I wear my headphones. So it's obvious that I'm doing something else, whether I'm watching a movie, which is pretty good, or I might be reading a car magazine, or if I'm going to something like, usually I get my script for some of the announcing gigs at SEMA, and I'll go over that on there. But I have those on, kind of like, I'm not a visit with. She always says that I'll talk to everybody and I overshare, but not on an airplane. That's like, I don't. Yeah.
No, pre-COVID, I was the act like you're sick person, so nobody wants to be by me. Chelsea and I would always fly to events together, and we would always one take the outside, one take the inside. In the middle seat, we put the puke bag on.
Yeah.
I don't really like people.
That's Carrie's secret. Yeah, nobody wants to sit by somebody that thinks they're going to get sick.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good trick. I need to learn that one. That's a good trick. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you ever have a bad event and you just like, I can't be around people, take the puke bag out.
Yeah.
Normally works every time.
Throw it down.
Yeah. So anything you want to add? Anybody you want to thank before we wind this up?
No, thank you guys for having me. It's great, great conversation. Appreciate it. And yeah, it was a blast. No, thank you. Thank you very much for having me on.
So we've had this on other people. We had Larry Erickson we recorded last week, Cadzilla designer, worked for Cadillac and 2005 Mustang. He does not answer his Instagram messages. And neither does Brian Lohnes. So finally,
My bad.
on his trip, asked me a question. I was like, hey, I didn't actually think he would post the answer up there. It's like, hey, let's do the podcast. I've done that a couple of times. Yeah, let me get to it. Well, finally, after 6 months of trying to get Mr. Lohnes on our podcast, we finally got it wrapped up tonight. So
the nerd over here.
It was the perfect time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the perfect timing. That's all we needed. We needed the perfect timing, and this was it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So we want to thank Brian Lohnes for being on the Strange Motion Way podcast. You can check him out almost every weekend on, what is the channel? It's FS1?
FS1 or Fox? Yeah.
And Fox.
We're on FS1 and Fox. Yep.
Oh, yeah. Perfect. And maybe at Drag Week or this place, or check out his Dorkomotive podcast and Hot Rod podcast. And I think that
YouTube as well. You gotta get Brian Lohnes. My YouTube channel is Brian Lohnes, and there's loads of videos on drag racing history, mechanical history, World War I and II history. I'm working on a video about forestry history right now because I don't know why. That's why.
Because you can.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Because I can.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
We'll see you later.
Mild. The Strange Motion Way podcast, brought to you by
Royal Purple. Premium synthetic motor oils and high-performance chemicals have been designed to improve performance, provide long-term protection, and give you the confidence to push your vehicle to the limit. Royal Purple Premium Synthetic Motor Oils.